Hello. The plan for today is to talk a little bit about goal setting. And for anyone who's going to be here live or for those listening to the recording, we've all got different goals, particularly when we're talking about yoga teacher training process. You might have goals to complete your yoga teacher training, or your goals might be more oriented around beginning your teaching practice. Or if you've completed your teacher training or you're thinking ahead, you might already be thinking about building your yoga business. So the goal for today is to hopefully give you some ideas and maybe some tools and strategies and some inspiration to start to make some confident steps in the direction of your goals. So that's going to be the focus for today. I think as we go along, it's really important to know that different tools and strategies work for different people. And I am going to suggest some tools a little bit later on in our discussion. But I think before you start looking at tools and strategies, it's really good to sort of begin with an idea of who you are as a student and a teacher, and what your approach is, maybe some of the challenges that you might want to be overcoming. And so we're going to start out by asking some questions. And so you might even pull out your laptop or a journal and make some notes on some of these questions, because this is where we practice yoga, right? We're getting to know ourselves. We're seeing our strengths. We're looking at how we address challenges and obstacles, how we motivate ourselves, how we hold ourselves accountable. So we could consider this an important part of your yoga practice, not just completing your studies, but learning about who you are as a student and as a teacher, learning about how you can best support yourself and how you might then in the future support your own students once you become a teacher and a guide in yoga. So we want to think about this whole process as being part of your yoga journey, as opposed to, I got to get this learning stuff out of the way so I can teach. This is all part of it, right? So I've got some questions for you, and I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about it. So please do pipe up. My first question is, what motivates you to pursue a goal? And I think that it's good to understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Maybe you've heard about that before. These are things that drive us to take action. And extrinsic motivators are like the external rewards or the external incentives that help us to drive us, right? As a student, that might include like good reviews of your work, or as a teacher, beginning to get paid for teaching yoga, right? So when you're studying, you might be studying persistently because you want to complete your certificate and begin teaching as soon as possible. And those are extrinsic motivators. And we also have intrinsic motivators. And these are more our internal drives, things that come from inside, like personal satisfaction, curiosity, a desire to learn. And this motivation comes from the enjoyment or the value we find in the activity itself. And all of you have at least some intrinsic motivation in your yoga teacher training studies. You're studying yoga because you're passionate about it and you're curious about it and you enjoy learning about yoga, regardless of what the external rewards are. So I'm interested to hear if you've got some idea of understanding what your motivations are and how those motivations help you move forward with your studies. I think it is super helpful to know where you're starting from. And like, I've never thought about what motivates me and if it's an extrinsic motivator or like if it's coming from the inside or the outside. Like, I've never thought about that. Great. Now you've got a place to start looking at what motivates you. That's awesome. And for all of us, it's usually some combination of that, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right? Like we begin studying yoga because we're so keen on yoga, and then we think maybe I could become a yoga teacher. And then we think, okay, I got to get through this study so that I can start teaching yoga. But I have to remember, I started this because I love yoga and I'm passionate about it, and I want to take time learning, right? And so to me, at least, it helps me when I'm studying stay in a place of curiosity and not just like tick, 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 I got to get this done, right? And these are things to come back to when we start having obstacles or challenges, right? What is motivating me, and can this motivation help me through this challenge? So that's a really great way to let those motivations guide you in your studies and also help you overcome that overwhelm that can come from like looking at the whole forest. Like, I'm going to pick a tree today, and ooh, this tree's so interesting, right? And eventually, tree by tree, you've studied the whole forest. And then you start to look at, it's a terrible metaphor, but how do you eat an elephant? Don't eat elephants, obviously, but like one bite at a time. If you just stand there looking at the elephant, you're like, there's no way I could eat an elephant, but like one bite at a time, one tree at a time, and then you've learned the whole forest. Yeah. I really like the idea that we take what motivated us to learn more about yoga, what we got curious about, what we wanted to know, the how and the why of yoga, then becomes our motivation for teaching, right? Then forms the foundation for our teaching philosophy. So that we take all those things that we got so excited about learning and we start to share them with our students. And we know that our students don't take it all, they don't eat the whole elephant at once either, right? They're hearing little things from us. Sometimes they need to hear it for a few classes. Sometimes they need to hear us say something for months before it sinks in and they go, I get that. Sometimes when people come to yoga with a gym attitude, it takes a long time for them to drop into a more yoga frame of mind when it comes to how we approach movement of yoga, right? And so that's something that we can do as teachers, is to keep reinforcing that message, to be listening to your body, to be listening to your breath, to be choosing movements that are right for you today. That's what we've got to offer. And then it's up to our students to learn how to take that on board and apply that to their practice, right? And I think just going back again, when you're clear about your motivations, I think that really helps you become more clear about your teaching philosophy and setting a foundation for what you're going to be offering in your class, right? And I think that it's a really strong place to start, right? So this is both for your studies, beginning a teaching practice, and building a business. And you might have the same motivators for all of those things, or you might find that your motivations are different for all three, or that they change over time. So this is something I highly recommend now or after we have this discussion, is jot some notes down. Like, really take some time to get clear about it, especially if you've really never thought about what does motivate me. Like, I went into this, like I knowingly went into this, but I don't know that I had clarity in a way that I could write a sentence and say, this is why I'm doing this. This is what motivates me. So that's something to do. The next question I want to ask you is, how do you prioritize your goals? So how do you make decisions about the importance and the timing of your objectives, right? So as a student, choosing study units, making space for practice, recording all of it and submitting it. If you're preparing to begin to teach, getting your first aid completed, getting insurance, getting professional membership. As a teacher, balancing your own practice and your teaching and your admin and your marketing, there's lots to do in all these stages. So How do you prioritize? Just on a slight tangent on this, that's another way that we can be teaching and modeling yoga and self-care and self-compassion is by not um, sacrificing our own needs or our family's needs for the sake of our business or our teaching or our studies, and to model like, this is what I need now, and so this is what I'm setting aside, here's what I'm delegating, here's what I can no longer do at the moment, and this is why. And I think that that's another way of teaching, to show that I won't keep struggling under this load when I have this other priority, right? I don't think we see enough of that modeled for us. And so I think that we can do some of that modeling, right? Not to put that weight on your shoulders, but like, I think that we're living in a world now where we've sacrificed our needs so much. We've kept so quiet about our needs and put them on the back burner. And I think that as yoga teachers, it's great if we instead are just slightly more open about how we might need to reprioritize in those moments, and maybe a little less guilty about it. Because the trouble is that we can take those attitudes and those patterns and bring them into our yoga teaching, which I know I did. I'm working on a course on burnout right now, actually, like burnout for yoga teachers, because it is a pattern for yoga teachers or anyone in a helping profession to deprioritize ourselves and put our students in place number one. And that can lead to burnout. So when you're thinking about how do I prioritize my goals, you might think about like, my self-care and my family care stays in the number one spot no matter how excited I am about studying yoga and teaching yoga and practicing yoga. I have to remember that balance and health stay in that number one spot, right? So this might be something you do a little bit of journaling about, like, how am I going to prioritize my goals, especially for those of you who are working full time, studying or teaching yoga, taking care of dependents, whether that be children or parents. There's a lot to juggle. So, prioritizing your life and prioritizing your goals and how you're going to get to those goals, right? The next question I want to ask is, how do you keep accountable with yourself? And when I ask that, I don't mean how do you make yourself feel guilty for not getting everything done in a day. That's not what this is about. I'm asking what strategies you use to maintain accountability. So that might be making lists, scheduling study or practice into your calendar, setting particular study goals week to week or month to month. And we will talk about tools in a moment, but like, do you have existing strategies to stay accountable to yourself? So our friend Sun talked a little bit about her strategy. She's every day I do a little bit of philosophy study. Mornings, that's my time to practice. This is how I stay accountable to my practice. And this is how I support myself and my teaching, right? So your strategies might be different, but I'm interested to know, in yoga or in life or in work, how do you keep accountable with yourself? Is it technology? Is it your Apple Watch giving you I don't have one, but you get a ring, you get something sparkles when you've exercised enough in a day, right? That's a way people keep accountable to themselves, using a technology like that. In my own life, I put everything in my life in a Google Calendar. That's how I stay accountable, because I'm self-employed. No one makes me do anything. So I have to make me do things. Sometimes I shuffle things across the week, But like, I stay accountable with myself by putting things into a calendar. Do you have strategies that you use to stay accountable? But getting to know yourself and how, and again, keeping yourself accountable is not the same as weighing yourself down with guilt, because that's a guilt. Just feeling guilty for not having studied today, that's just going to take energy and it's not moving you forward. So if you've never thought before about how you might have some accountability strategies or tools in your life, now's a good time to think about that, especially for those of you who have plans to be a self-employed yoga teacher, because when you're self-employed, no one makes you do anything. You have to make you do. So you need to have some strategies in place that help you to do that, right? Just loving what you do, teaching yoga, is not enough of an accountability strategy. Right? And we'll talk about some tools in a moment. I'll ask the next question, which is, what success strategies have worked for you before? So if you think back to other times in your life where you've been working towards a goal, what helped you to become successful? What tools did you use? What strategies did you use? What games did you play with yourself that helped you reach your goals? I want to say, like, for the night owls out there who are often being shamed by us early birds, that everyone has their own different rhythm. And for the night owls, like, if that's the time that you've got a burst of energy and clarity and motivation, use that time. If you've been trying to drag yourself out of bed for years to exercise or do yoga or do study in the morning and it's never working out, that might not be a strategy for you. That might not be your success strategy. Your success strategy might be lunchtime study. It might be afternoon or evening study, right? Figuring out what a success strategy is for you is part of your journey, right? It's part of your learning. And I think that often we can try to force ourselves into the strategies that we see in the media or that we see working for other people, and they don't work for us, and then it's just constant opposition, it's constant challenge. So you can figure out what your rhythm is, and it might be, you might be a daily person, you might be a weekend warrior, you might do 3 hours a day on Saturdays and Sundays. That might be your rhythm, is to pour yourself in for a couple hours and then emerge, right? It's worth taking the time to get to know yourself, and that's part of this journey, right? And again, not just for completing your studies, which of course you want to do, but like moving forward into a teaching practice, moving forward into running a yoga business potentially, that you want to know these rhythms for yourself, right? If I figure out for myself that I'm not at my best in the morning, it's really hard to drag myself out of bed, I don't love it, my study is clunky and inefficient, and then I try studying at night and it flows and it feels great, and that's a rhythm I can sustain, that teaches me something potentially about my teaching practice. Am I then going to say, yeah, I'm going to teach at 6 a.m. every morning before I go to work? I'm not, because I know that's not my rhythm, right? I've learned from my studies that I'm going to do my best work in the evenings when I've got the energy, right? So starting to really think about your own rhythms and what success strategies have worked for you before and might work for you again. That's something to kind of put some energy towards, and to not necessarily feel as though you have to use the same strategies that other people use. Next question. You have faced obstacles in the past on your way to goals. How did you overcome them? So thinking about other times in your life where you've been working towards a goal and obstacles arose, do you see similar obstacles now? Do you see an opportunity to overcome those challenges like you overcame challenges in the past? Could you use the same or similar strategies in your yoga goals, right? So taking some time to identify patterns of challenge and patterns of resilience can be really useful in your yoga goals, but also all of your aims. Set yoga like, right?
Yeah.
You've identified something, right? You can see a pattern now and you can
Mm.
observe it. You can have your witness consciousness on, watch that emerge. Oh, it's that old friend. Confident. There
Yes.
you are again. We've done this dance before. I
Yeah.
know how to move through this, right? Do it scared.
Yeah.
My own strategy with that is to make jokes with myself. I have kind of a dark sense of humor. Probably no one will die. Like, I didn't feel
I use
confident
that.
about doing this new thing, but hopefully no one will die. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it out. Right. And it's not a strategy that's going to work for everyone. And that's certainly not everyone's sense of humor. But for me, it kind of helped shock me out of catastrophizing what could go wrong if I try a new thing. Because it's so silly, right? That's a strategy that works for me, is using that very weird sense of humor. You will likely have a different strategy, but like, how do you, when the voices come in or when the obstacles start piling up, how do you leap over those obstacles? Or how do you take that frenemy of lack of confidence by the hand and say, fine, you've shown up, but we're going to yoga together. We're going to go do this, right?
Mhm.
So that's something to think about. Often when we only look towards our successes, we can miss some of those patterns that are often repeating patterns that get in the way of our goals, right? And not just looking at obstacles, but looking at like, what do you do when you feel unmotivated? There's been times in your life you've been unmotivated in other areas of your life where you felt discouraged. How do you understand that emotional response and how do you overcome it or how do you cope with it, right, while it's there? So all of these are questions to be asking yourself. I think that sometimes we go straight to tools and I'm going to buy a journal, or I'm going to use this new digital calendar, or I'm going to buy this software package or whatever. And I think before we do the doing, we need to do the thinking. And like, what is going to work? Who am I as a student and as a teacher? And how do I work towards my goals? And what supports might I need? And how do I hold myself accountable? And I think that answering those questions will help you make great choices when it comes to tools that you're going to use. So let's talk a little bit about tools. So some of the strategies, you've definitely heard about SMART goals. It's probably the most common goal setting tool. The SMART framework is something that I know in my brain: specific, measurable, achievable or action oriented, relevant, and time bound. And so it helps us to break down our goals into clear, actionable steps. Right? And so instead of having a wistful, I want to grow my yoga business, we need to make it specific. Like, I want to build up to 4 weekly classes in the next 3 months by connecting with local studios and gyms, subbing or doing class covers, and maybe surveying family and friends about private or semi-private classes. So this is like not just like I have a dream, but like, here's my plan, right? So when you use the SMART goals framework, and you can Google SMART goals, and there's tons of free templates online, or if you use Canva, there's great templates on Canva, so that you can plan out your studies or plan out your work so that you don't feel overwhelmed. And so that it's not just a misty dream, that it's clear, right? That you can break down your big goals into manageable tasks. So rather than forest, tree by tree, And what I like about it is you get to celebrate little wins along the way. You get to give yourself little tick marks or little stickers. And I think that that gives us some extra motivation to keep moving. So your SMART goals. So if we're talking about your coursework, you might, use SMART goals to move through study units, logging your practice, submitting assignments and assessments. Like that's kind of the work that you're doing. When it comes to teaching, so for those of you who are moving towards beginning your teaching practice, use the SMART goals to make a plan to begin teaching professionally, like first aid and CPR, insurance, professional membership, right? Set all these things out so they're not just like, hovering over your head as I have to do all these things. You've laid them all out. If you've tried SMART goals in the past and it doesn't work for you, if lists and digital calendars aren't your thing, you might use a tool like a vision board. So if you're a more visual person, this helps you visualize your goals. It's creating a visual representation of your goals rather than those lists and calendar entries, right? And for some of us, having a visual goal board can be really motivating. So if you haven't seen a vision board before, it's like pulling together images and words and symbols that represent your goals. And, in the physical, if you're going to do like a physical board, you pull them all together onto a cork board or a whiteboard. If you prefer digital tools, this is what a lot of people use Pinterest for, to kind of collect images that you can look at and go like, yeah, this is the thing I'm doing, right? And that's particularly good for those of you who are more visually oriented. As I said, my strategy is to use a planner, like I study calendar, a work calendar. I plug everything into my Google Calendar that I'm doing, whether it be study or work or my movement practice. It's all in my calendar so that I can plan my day and stay accountable for, my goals. And also I can look back and kind of track my progress. So that's the strategy that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it helps me to break down larger goals into more manageable tasks for each day or each week. So right now I'm working on a new course and I'm plugging in an hour every couple of days to work on that so that it eventually gets done, right? When it comes to your studies, I know that sometimes you look at your training portal or you look at your manual and it's all so much. It's a big amorphous blob of study, but planning it out can make it a lot more manageable and can help you move forward. So, use the sample study schedules, use your study checklist and overview. If you want to use other tools, there's great tools out there. Like I said, I use the Google Calendar, there's Trello, there, make a journal, make a binder for yourself. So if that kind of system works for you. I know it doesn't work for everyone. So for some people, a bullet journal is really helpful. It works for different brains. Like it gives you a chance to kind of track your goals and your progress. And it's a little bit more flexible, a little bit more creative than like employing a linear calendar list or a to-do list, right? It gives you kind of a balance of organization and kind of reflection and movement, right? So you can just use a notebook for this, but actually, I think that here's an example of a bullet journal, right? This is from Canva. So you could do this in a notebook or you could download templates from the internet. So here you're prioritizing, you've got a to-do list, you've got some notes. Maybe your notes are, I didn't get through everything today. There's some things I'm going to set aside for Saturday when I'm studying again. space for reflections. I got really excited learning about this thing. I want to learn more. This gives you a little bit more flexibility in how you're planning things. A useful strategy is to do like a 30, 60, 90 plan. So like breaking things down into 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, setting a defined goal. Like I'm going to submit something every week. That might not work for everyone, but like here's my deadline, and then here's how much space I need for each of these units. Or I'm going to be away for 2 weeks. I'm not going to submit anything then. If you like deadlines, plotting things out and giving yourself multiple deadlines. I'm going to complete, a certain number of units by then I'm going to complete this chunk, then I'm going to complete this chunk. Setting yourself some goals, maybe, hard deadlines, and then with some soft deadlines of what you're going to complete in the middle. Again, you might look at 30, 60, 90, 120 day plans so that you're breaking your goals into chunks. Pause and at stages and go, okay, I'm on track, or okay, these things have taken more time than I thought. I've had other things going on in life. I'm going to give myself more room up to the 60-day mark to complete some things, whatever. Like it gives you a chance to kind of pause and reflect as you go along. So I think that that's useful. This is one of the things that we can do in one-to-one coaching, is kind of plan things out. So if you're struggling with that, we can work on that together. One of the things that I think is a really good tool is to have action lists where you do some prioritizing. So like making a to-do list is really straightforward thing to do, right? But prioritizing tasks, there's a thing called the Eisenhower matrix. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before, but it's this thing where you look at like what's urgent and non-urgent, what's important and what's non-important, and it can kind of give you some clarity in what to tackle first, what you might set aside, what you might, pause on. So essentially what you're doing is first you're listing your tasks, and then you're like assessing their urgency. These are the two important things, urgency and importance. And then you're taking those tasks and putting them into quadrants. The first quadrant is important and urgent. And the second is important, but not urgent. So you're like, so the first one is like, these are things to do right now. The second is, I'm going to schedule these things. The third quadrant is urgent, but not important. And like when we're talking about this example is like a work example, delegate, but like you can't really delegate out your studies, right? And then the fourth quadrant is not urgent, not important. Set that aside. Right? So this matrix can kind of give you an idea of like how you might plot out your priorities and how you might explore your tasks. So one of the things that comes up for me a lot when I'm digging into study is I will study too many things at once. And using a tool like this, it can be helpful to be like, okay, I've signed up for a course that's got a deadline, and I've signed up for a course that doesn't have a deadline. So one of those courses fits into urgent and important, and one is like not urgent and important, or perhaps even not urgent, not important. It can be set aside while I'm working on something else, right? This is your back burner right here, right? The not urgent, not important. And sometimes that stuff gets in the way of doing these two things, the important things. So this can be a tool if you have some difficulty in prioritizing your tasks. This can be something that you might find useful. Or you might innovate that and go like, nothing's like not important, but like, okay, what needs to be done now? What can be done later? Okay, we're running out of time because there was so much to talk about, but I do want to just mention one last thing, and that is sankalpa. So this comes from our yoga practice. Sankalpa is like setting an intention or a resolve or a resolution, and then maintaining a focus on that intention. And a sankalpa is usually more than a material goal. It's more of like a higher intention, something more universal that maybe speaks to your highest aims for your practice and your teaching, as opposed to like the tasks and the things you're prioritizing. So if you want some homework for today, is to think about what your sankalpa might be for your studies and your practice in teaching it. And it might be about how you will impact your community. It might be about how your practice will help in your evolution. There's no right or wrong in creating your sankalpa, but there are a few guidelines. So you want to speak your sankalpa in the positive. So I am, rather than the negative, I'm not. You want to speak your sankalpa as though it's already happening. So like it is, rather than I want. And your sankalpa needs to be something you can believe in, right? Something you can hold in your heart that feels true for you. So an example of a sankalpa is like, my yoga teaching is a source of peace to me and my community. And how we use that sankalpa is in moments of peace or relaxation, like in Shavasana, the end of a practice, or within a meditation. We recite our sankalpa like we're writing it on our subconscious. So if you want a little bit of homework for today, maybe take some time to think about how you might develop a sankalpa. And it might be something that you play with and edit over time. And maybe this can be something that you can add to your practice. And again, a higher intention that speaks to your highest aims for your practice and teaching, and something that hopefully can carry you through dips in motivation and obstacles and inspire you to keep going. Okay. So this is a very full discussion. Thank you so much for being here and for all your insights and wisdom. From here, consider if any of the tools or strategies we've talked about today can support you in moving forward towards your goals, whether that be for studies, practice, teaching, yoga business. If you have not yet completed your business basics unit, there's some stuff here that you've just thought about that you can apply to that unit. So now might be a time that you start to dig into that, thinking about maybe creating a 6-month sketch of your plans that include your study, your practice, and your teaching. So that might be the tool that you use at this point, is the yoga business basics sketch. And you might create and add a sankalpa to your yoga practice. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Hello to those of you listening to the recording. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you very much.